Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, greetings from the beautiful state of Alabama. Alright, the last time I was telling you guys about my mom and my dad's family history, I think I left off where the part where my grandfather, my dad's dad, died, leaving the whole thing to his mother, which they were not very close at all. And if I remember correctly, I was also telling you guys that she allocated the wealth in not in a 50-50 portions. I can't attest to what the percentage was, but certainly the younger brother, my uncle, got the bigger portion of the inheritance, leaving my father to the unfair disadvantage. And what made it worse was whatever portion my dad received, it was in the form of a trust that was the sole property of his brother, my uncle. The only difference was the trust was not, my uncle could not touch the trust until my father died. So basically, my dad was living on a trust fund on the interest of the trust. And it was set up in a way that the trust was earning some certain percentage of amount of interest, and a portion of the interest went into making the trust bigger and bigger and bigger, and also making my father I don't know what the real term is, but the remittance, whatever interest that came out of the trust that was allocated for him, also got bigger and bigger. As I mentioned also, that the trust was the sole property of my uncle, but my uncle could not access the trust until my dad died. And again, what I'm trying to emphasize is that my father, Jack, hired the best lawyers out there to revoke the trust. But it was so written in ironclad that nobody can molest the trust in favor of my dad. So anyway, as time went by, the day my dad died, I think the trust was worth about $30 million. And I also remember telling you guys that the day my dad died, I specifically, vividly remember my uncle, Uncle John, which I am named after him. I remember him sitting at the front porch by the steps. With a, I don't know, I can't I can't describe the facial expression when he was sitting at the steps of the front door, as if he was grieving that he lost a brother. By the way, my dad and his brother were not close. So, but you know, the benefit of the doubt, losing your brother, it's got to be painful, right? So was my uncle thinking about losing his brother, or that day he was worth $30 million? So anyway, all the funeral arrangements and medical bills and all of that were expenses paid by the trust. So the final arrangement, the final expenses was fully paid by by the trust, and we didn't have to, thank God we didn't have to spend anything. So we had a little bit of a wake, you know. People from my dad's side of the family showed up. More than half of them, I didn't even know who they were. Some of my dad's few friends showed up. But before my dad died, it was always his wish that he would be buried in Camiguin Island in the Philippines. That was his final resting place wish list. So we, after the wake, we put him in a crate, ship him home to the Philippines, and his best friend / adopted brother LP met us at the airport, and he was the one that spent the rest of the expenses for all the burials and all the wakes and all that stuff. All right, so I'm kind of skipping timeline here in order for this to make sense and make the story come alive. Let's go back a little bit, maybe 20 years back in time. I also mentioned that in 1974, my family and my dad, we moved out to the island. That's when my dad bought a very swampy place. Nobody wanted because it's all swamp, you know. But my dad saw what the swamp could be, not what it was. And my dad envisioned that he can make something beautiful out of that. And he did. With the little amount of money he received from the trust each month in 1974, I don't trust was already existed in 1974. Because I remember in maybe 1979, my grandmother sent my uncle to the Philippines to verify that me and my brother Andy really is his brother's son or children. So I don't really know when the trust really started. Was it after my grandmother died, or maybe even before? I don't know. But anyway, for the little amount of money that my dad was receiving, he started building a resort, a private pier, a personal private pier, and he was going to build a resort there. And it turns out to be one of the greatest times of my life as a young boy, because if you remember correctly, I also told that my dad was a very wide reader. He was a jack of all trades. That guy can do just about anything. I think he learned how to handle explosives, most especially dynamites, in Germany, I think. And my dad was a very crazy, that crazy. He was a nut when it comes to handling dynamite. Oh, he loved dynamite. And the reason the dynamite came to play is that Camiguin Island consists of big, giant boulders as big as houses. One of the hardest rocks, volcanic rocks, ever known to man. I mean, those rocks back there are just really heavy and very hard. The reason that he got into the dynamite is because he was blasting big boulders off the side of the hills. It could be as big as a car, you know. I mean, they were big, and he used the boulders to extend out towards the sea like a little pier. And so he did that, and I remember underneath the bottom of my bed was 12 cases of dynamite. Now, I know we've been taught that dynamite is extremely expensive, dangerous and all that, but I don't know, maybe a lot of you know that you can shoot a dynamite, you can even put it in the fire, and it doesn't do anything. In fact, my dad once got a stick of dynamite and put it in an open fire, and all it did was it burned into beautiful different colors of green, yellow, and orange, and red. It was like a rainbow. The way dynamite works is you have to pound it, you have to shock it a certain amount of, it's not the spark that creates the dynamite to causes a dynamite to explode? It's the concussion of it. Just for example, if you hold a tiny little firecracker in your hand, you don't feel the fire, but you feel the punch. Well, the dynamite requires a certain amount of foot-pounds of punch to make it explode. That's how dynamite works. Basically, if your firecracker is big enough, maybe a M80 would probably be enough to set off a dynamite. Probably. My dad had two different kinds of blasting caps. There were the fuse kind and there were the electric kind. But I digress. That went on for many, many years. My dad was building the project. And you have to understand Camiguin Island in at that time, where it was still dark, no running water. Roads were built out of gravel and dust. And it started to become a tourist destination from people around the world. Now, when my dad was building his project, I tell you what, there was no Facebook or any social media at that time, but once in a while we'll have a tourist from people from around the world, because they heard of a German American living there, and what they would do is it became a word to mouth. It was people spoke of it around the world and say, hey, go to Camiguin Island. There's a German American there named Jack. He'll put you up, give you a place to stay, free food, laundry. It was a dream come true. And at that time, basically, there were no tourist hotels in existence yet. And also, at that time, we had our running water, we had our own electricity, we had refrigerators, modern kitchens. So tourists from around the world just really loved the idea of going there. I can't tell you the number of Australians that went to stay there. Oh my. And I remember as a little boy, I used to look at those Australian people, and they were the giant of the giant, man. I remember, if you could picture what Goliath looks like in your mind right now, and as a 7 or 8 year old little boy, maybe 5-year-old, that's what I envisioned Australians were. They were very, very tall, big people. Occasionally we'll have the Germans, Americans, the French. And while people were going there, my mom was very active in the community. She donated a lot of money for schools. Half of the barrio was employed by my dad and my mom. And my mom was very influential in the barrio. And one of my mom's favorite hobby was to play matchmakers to the local women of the village or the barrio. In fact, I can't tell you the number of locals that got married to people from around the world. And so it's always been a joke. You could come in single, you'll have to leave with another, with a wife or a husband. It was mostly women though. Mostly women that got married in the barrio. But anyway, what else is there? There was also the time where, in my earliest days, that truly was a very unique perspective for me and my brother, because even though we lived in a small barrio, we lived in a very modern, very big house with electricities and refrigerators and TVs and all that stuff. So basically, it was almost like my brother and I kind of lived in a castle, kind of an idea. But we went to the barrio to play with other kids. So we played their games, we ate their foods, we practiced their customs and mentality. But when we got home, we also were disciplined or brought up in a way of my dad's ideology of you're a son of a German guy. Work hard. Take pride of your work. And yeah, that was, so I kind of lived in two worlds. One world is, a very modern world. The other one is down to the earth life. My brother and I also went to the local schools. Our best friends were, the locals. What else is there? My brother and I would sometimes sleep over at different houses. We were very, I don't know what the word is, but we were well liked and favored by the locals. I suppose because of my mom's influence in the barrio, right? Also, I think one of the aspect of it is that my brother and I, as a little boy, we were for some reason we were all white and blonde hair. We did not look like local children. We looked like typical brownish white young kids. So anyway, that went on for a long time, and not to mention that, as I mentioned, half of the population of the barrio was employed by my dad. So that was, I had a really good fun time things that also was a major practice, I think, is in order for us to go to the main city of Mindanao, the city of Cagayan de Oro, we would have to take a ferry across the channel and traverse a very dangerous highway, which I mentioned earlier, that highway, some of the potholes were as big as buses, and it was just a pure dust bowl of a road. Once in a while we would go to the main city for a dental appointment, check up on doctor's appointment, or my mom had to go buy some groceries, or my dad had to supply his shop. So once in a while we would commute back and forth. One of the highlights of that trip is that I get to go watch a movie. The movie theaters was only located in the large city of Mindanao, Cagayan de Oro City, and we would watch a movie there. And back then there were always a feature. There was a double feature. So you watch one movie, then there's a double feature. So you basically get to see two movies for, what was it, 4 pesos? And it was a very large movie theaters. And at that time, one of the largest, the most popular movies back then was Jackie Chan. It was the German-American War. We seldom saw local productions. Westerns was a big genre at that time. And it would be funny because after I got home to the island, I would relive all these movie scenes and telling it to the little local kids, to my friends. And I was quite a storyteller, I suppose. Little kid trying to tell a story of something like Jackie Chan, or it was about the Western cowboys. And so I would tell the story with action. It was quite entertaining. That was the earliest exposure of the kids what a movie was. Imagine that, right? Alright, so between that era, while that time was the one that existed, my dad and his best friend / adopted brother LP, they were very close. LP was a very gifted electronics technician, even though he was a mechanical engineer by education. He self-taught himself into fixing electronics. And he was the very first electronics technician in Mindanao. So he opened up a electronics shop. He also opened up the very first Betamax rental store. If you don't know what that is, it's the same as the Family Video, except it's all Betamax and VHS. While he was doing this, my dad had an idea to come to the United States. Well, I think I better reserve that story a little bit later. Oh boy, look at the time. Looks like we ran out of time, so we'll have to do this another time. Alright, I hope you will continue to watch these series, and I thank you for watching. John, be good here. Have a good and godly day.